My name is Eleanor Vance, but for the last decade, everyone has called me Nora. For 10 years, I was the loyal caretaker, the quiet shadow in a grand, historic home in Savannah, Georgia. I dedicated my life to caring for the family patriarch, the reclusive and brilliant Mr. Alistair Blackwood. His greedy nieces and nephews treated me with disdain, calling me the help, and constantly reminding me that once the old man was gone, I would be out on the street. Today, they gathered in the dark wood-paneled library for the reading of his will, their eyes gleaming with anticipation, ready to carve up his vast shipping empire. They saw me standing in the corner and smirked, assuming I was there to serve them one last time. What they didn't know was that Mr. Blackwood, in his final, masterful move, had planned a shocking surprise. They were about to learn that the person they had ignored and humiliated was the one who held all the power. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to see how a decade of quiet dignity turned into the most satisfying and poetic revenge imaginable. My journey into the world of the Blackwood family began not with ambition, but with compassion. I was a 22-year-old nursing student looking for a part-time job to pay for my tuition. An agency placed me as a companion and caregiver for Mr. Alistair Blackwood, an 80-year-old widower who had recently suffered a fall. He lived in a sprawling Gothic revival mansion overlooking the Savannah River, a place filled with history, shadows, and a profound sense of loneliness. Mr. Blackwood was a legend in Savannah, the last heir of the Blackwood shipping line, a company that had dominated the port for over a century. He was sharp, eccentric, and deeply saddened by the death of his wife years prior. He had no children of his own, only a brother's children, Marcus and Cynthia, who saw him not as an uncle, but as a living vault they were waiting to inherit. From my very first day, the family dynamic was painfully clear. Marcus, a slick and arrogant businessman in his 50s, would visit once a month. He would stride into the house, barely acknowledging my existence, and immediately begin talking to his uncle about the company's stock performance or the value of the estate's antiques. His conversations were always about money. He saw the entire legacy as his birthright. Cynthia was, if possible, even worse. She was a woman obsessed with her social standing, dripping in designer clothes and old money snobbery. She would visit for holidays, bringing her equally snobbish husband and children. During these visits, she treated me like a piece of furniture, unless she needed something. She would snap her fingers at me to fetch her a drink or hand me her coat without making eye contact. To her, I was invisible, a necessary but unimportant part of the household staff. They constantly reminded me of my place. During Christmas dinner, I was expected to eat in the kitchen with the cook. When they hosted their garden parties, Cynthia would give me a list of menial tasks like polishing the silver or arranging flowers, telling me to stay out of sight of the important guests. The worst moments were when they would speak about me as if I wasn't there. I once overheard Marcus telling his wife not to worry about me, that I was just the help, and that the first thing they would do when they inherited was to clear out all the old fixtures, referring to both the staff and the decor. They were deeply suspicious of my relationship with Mr. Blackwood. Over the years, he and I had developed a deep bond. I was no longer just his caregiver. I was his confidant, his friend. We would spend hours in his library where he would tell me stories of his life, his travels, and his late life. He taught me to play chess and appreciate classical music. He listened to my dreams of one day opening a small, free clinic for the elderly. In return, I gave him the one thing his family never did: genuine care and companionship. His family saw this closeness as a threat. Cynthia once accused me outright of manipulating her uncle, of trying to worm my way into his will. She warned me that they had the best lawyers in Georgia and that any attempt I made to get a piece of the Blackwood fortune would be a battle I would lose. I simply told her that I wanted nothing from him but his well-being. She laughed in my face.
As Mr. Blackwood grew frailer, his family's visits became more frequent and more transparently greedy. Marcus started bringing architects and estate planners with him, openly discussing his plans to subdivide the property's waterfront land for a luxury condo development, a plan he knew his uncle detested. Mr. Blackwood would listen silently, a look of profound disappointment in his eyes. Cynthia began tagging items in the house with small, discreet sticky notes, mentally claiming pieces of art and antique furniture for herself. They were vultures circling, and their lack of subtlety was vulgar. During this time, Mr. Blackwood became more introspective. He often spoke of his legacy, not in terms of money, but in terms of values. He told me he was disgusted by what his family had become. He lamented that the Blackwood name, once synonymous with integrity and community leadership, was now represented by a pair of greedy, shallow individuals who cared for nothing but themselves. He would often ask me what I thought made a person truly wealthy. I would tell him it was having people who cared for you, a sense of purpose, and a clear conscience. He would smile sadly and nod, telling me I was wiser than all his relatives combined. A few months before he passed, he called me into his library with his lawyer, Mr. Abernathy. The family was not present. He told me he was making final revisions to his will and wanted me there as a witness. He seemed to be in good spirits, a strange, almost mischievous twinkle in his eye. He had me read several passages, mostly bequests to local charities and historical societies. He then had me sign a document that Mr. Abernathy explained was a, quote, private family declaration. I didn't read it closely, assuming it was a formality. I trusted him completely. Looking back, I realized this was part of his master plan. He was setting the final pieces on the chessboard. When Mr. Blackwood passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 90, I was heartbroken. I had lost my dearest friend. His family's reaction was starkly different. Cynthia arrived first, not to mourn, but to secure the house. She immediately began giving me orders, telling me to start packing my things as my services would no longer be required. Marcus arrived with a team of accountants, demanding access to all of the company's financial records. They treated the entire situation like a corporate takeover, not a family tragedy. For the week leading up to the funeral and the will reading, I was treated like an intruder in the home I had managed for a decade. They spoke to me only to give orders. They changed the locks on Mr. Blackwood's study. Cynthia even tried to bar me from attending the funeral, telling me it was a private family affair. It was only when Mr. Abernathy intervened, informing her that Mr. Blackwood had specifically requested my presence, that she backed down, her face contorted in a mask of fury. At the funeral, they put on a grand performance of grief while I stood at the back, genuinely mourning the loss of the kind man who had become my family. The day of the will reading, the atmosphere in the mansion's library was thick with tension and barely concealed greed. Marcus and Cynthia sat on the leather Chesterfield sofa in front of the lawyer's desk, looking like monarchs about to claim their kingdom. Their spouses and children were scattered around the room, their faces alight with anticipation. I stood quietly in the corner by the fireplace, as was my custom. Cynthia shot me a venomous look, whispering to her husband that she couldn't believe the help was allowed to be present for such an intimate family matter. Mr. Abernathy, a man of immense professional calm, cleared his throat and began to read. The will started predictably, with small bequests to his lifelong cook and gardener and donations to several of his beloved Savannah charities. Then the tone shifted. Mr. Blackwood's own words, read by the lawyer, filled the room. He began by addressing his nephew, Marcus. The will recounted in excruciating detail every single one of Marcus's failed business ventures that Mr. Blackwood had bailed him out of. It mentioned the condo development plan, calling it a vulgar betrayal of the Blackwood family's respect for the land. He concluded by stating that because Marcus had demonstrated a complete lack of business acumen and personal integrity, He was clearly unfit to lead the company. Next, he addressed Cynthia. The will described her obsession with social status as a hollow pursuit and detailed an incident where she had tried to sell a valuable family heirloom without her knowledge to pay for a country club membership. He stated that her vanity and lack of character made her unworthy of being a custodian of the Blackwood legacy. Marcus and Cynthia were white-faced, their confident smirks replaced with expressions of pure fury and disbelief.
Then came the final section, the distribution of the primary assets, the Blackwood Shipping Company, the historic estate, and the entirety of his financial portfolio, valued at over $900 million. Mr. Abernathy paused, looking over his glasses at the stunned family. He read from the will, Mr. Blackwood's voice echoing through the text. Having observed my family for many years, I have come to the sad conclusion that none of my blood relatives possess the character, loyalty, or wisdom to be the custodian of what my ancestors and I have built. They see this legacy not as a responsibility, but as a prize to be won. Therefore, I have decided to leave my entire estate to the one person who has shown me unwavering loyalty, selfless kindness, and the true meaning of family. The room held its breath. Marcus and Cynthia leaned forward, a flicker of hope that perhaps he was referring to one of their children. The lawyer continued, I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, without condition, to my beloved daughter. A gasp went through the room. Daughter? Marcus sputtered that his uncle had no daughter. Cynthia accused me of a last-minute trick. Mr. Abernathy held up a hand for silence and then looked directly at me. He finished the sentence. My beloved daughter, Eleanor Nora Vance. Chaos erupted. Cynthia screamed that it was impossible, a forgery. Marcus lunged toward the desk, shouting about lawsuits. Mr. Abernathy calmly produced another document, the private family declaration I had signed months ago. It was a formal adoption decree. In his final months, Mr. Alistair Blackwood had legally adopted me, making me his daughter and sole heir. He had kept it a secret as a final test of his family's character, a test they had spectacularly failed. The will concluded with one final, devastating line. Nora understands that wealth is a responsibility, not a right. My family has never understood the difference. Now they will have the opportunity to learn. The family's rage was impotent. Mr. Abernathy calmly explained that the will was ironclad and the adoption was legally unassailable. Any legal challenge would be a waste of their now non-existent money. For the first time, I stepped forward from the corner of the room. The timid caretaker was gone. In her place stood the new matriarch of the Blackwood family. I looked directly at Marcus and Cynthia, my voice steady and clear. I told them they had 24 hours to remove their personal belongings and vacate my property. Cynthia screamed that she couldn't throw them out. I simply replied that I could, and I would. It was a power they had held over me for a decade, and the reversal was absolute. They were forced to pack their bags under the watchful eye of the estate's security team, their snobbery replaced by a pathetic, sputtering fury. In the year that followed, I took the helm of Blackwood Shipping. The board of directors was initially skeptical, but I quickly proved them wrong. The years I had spent listening to Mr. Blackwood discuss his business, combined with my own innate sense of integrity, made me a surprisingly effective leader. I didn't just maintain the company, I modernized it, introducing sustainable practices and improving employee benefits, making the Blackwood name once again respected in the port of Savannah. I used a vast fortune to honor the memory of the man who had become my father. I established the Alistair Blackwood Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing free and high-quality in-home care for the elderly, ensuring that others could live out their final years with the same dignity and companionship he had received. As for the family, their downfall was as swift as it was complete. Stripped of their expected inheritance, their social standing evaporated overnight. They were forced to sell their homes and cars to cover their massive debts. Marcus's business failed. Cynthia became a social pariah. They were left with nothing, forced to live the ordinary middle-class lives they had always viewed with such contempt. My revenge was not loud or aggressive. It was the quiet, poetic justice of the situation. They treated me as the help, a person of no consequence, when I was the one who was secretly being groomed to inherit everything. They were so blinded by their greed and their own perceived superiority that they never saw the real value in the person who was right in front of them every day. They thought they were waiting for a payday, when in fact, they were being judged. And in the end, they were found wanting. Have you ever been judged or underestimated by people who thought they were better than you? Share your story in the comments below. If this story of poetic justice resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. Thank you for listening, and remember that true worth is measured by your character, not your bank account.